We don't need inflation. All these stories that the economists tell to try to justify deliberately creating inflation it's all wrong. The government has brainwashed people into believing that inflation is a good thing because the government benefits from it. The government steals through inflation. Inflation is really like a hidden tax, and they should be raising rates, they're cutting rates. We're pursuing a very inflationary monetary policy because we have so much debt. They're trying to bring down mortgage rates, they're trying to bring down long-term bond rates. They need to create inflation to do that. So they debase the value of the dollar. Foreign central banks can see this. They're getting rid of their dollars. What are they replacing their dollars with? They're replacing it with gold. They're moving away from US dollars and US treasuries to gold.
It's the debate with CZ.
People confuse store of value with price. Price is not value. Price is what you pay, right? Value is what you get. I mean, Bitcoin is nothing, has nothing in common with a physical, valuable, precious metal. What they say is that inflation is necessary to have a prosperous economy. We have to make sure prices go up. Prices went down, nobody would buy anything, which is bullshit, because the real way that inflation benefits the rich is it wipes out. Inflation benefits debtors and hurts creditors. My investment portfolio reflects what I expect the government to do, not what they should do. But
Inflation is good for the top 0.1% though, because you own asset. Why are you even fighting this system? You called out the 2008 financial crisis. Are we seeing the same thing now?
we're in a bigger bubble.
I am with Peter Schiff right now, and I am so excited because you're one of the most requested guests. People love you. Just read the comment section. People are talking about your style, your insights, also your skin and everything.
Well, thanks, Paul. Although my skin's not looking that great today. I kind of broke out somehow. I don't know what happened.
It's the debate with CZ.
No, it was from before that.
Can we talk about the debate a little bit? Because it is going to be in a couple hours, and I am intrigued. Why is the topic tokenized gold versus Bitcoin instead of gold versus Bitcoin?
Well, it's the origin of how this came about. And I think it's more of a conversation, obviously a bit adversarial, but not like a formal debate. There's no moderator. It's just kind of the two of us having a discussion about it. But the way it evolved, so I was doing an interview on another popular crypto podcast, and the topic of tokenized gold came up. And so I said, yeah, I certainly think that that's a viable use of blockchain. Ironically, it's probably one of the few things that could actually come out of it would be a way of making gold an even better medium of exchange through the tokenization, making gold more portable, more fungible, easier to use, in commerce. So I said, look, I'm probably going to have my own. I started something called T-Gold. And right now it's just a page on the Schiff Gold website. But if you go to tgold.com, it'll take you there where you can set up an account. And this is to have gold where we don't deliver it. Like Schiff Gold, people buy gold and we send out the bars or the coins, we mail it to their address. But with T-Gold, you just buy whatever, $100, $1,000, $5,000 worth of gold or silver, and we don't deliver it. You buy it and it's, segregated, but we vault it and have it, stored for you. So you just have, whatever quantity you want. Ultimately, what I'm working on is, in addition to being able to withdraw your gold physically, you'll be able to withdraw it in the form of a token. And that token basically just represents your ownership of that gold. But once you have it in the form of a token, you can transfer it to somebody else. Now they would own the gold instead of you. And you don't have to transfer all of your gold, whatever fraction you want, because it's all divisible into, tiny increments, just like, Bitcoin would be. So I mentioned I'm developing this. And also I'm going to have it so, people can get a debit card, credit card tied to their gold account. And, so they could turn their gold into a fiat currency, at point of sale. So if they wanted to go into a restaurant and they didn't have any cash, and they could use their gold, right? They could just use the card, and gold would be sold to cover the cost of the meal or whatever they're spending their money on. So I wanted to just build, this ecosystem where it was easy for people to use their gold as money, not just as a store of value where they're keeping gold, in a safe or, in a shoebox, hidden in their closet, but where they're carrying their gold around on their smartphone or on a debit card where, they could use it, right? So CZ saw the interview and commented that, this isn't going to work because it's like a trust me, bro kind of concept. Because he said, you have to trust the third party with your gold. So it's not going to work, right? Because Bitcoin is trustless. You don't have to trust any third parties. You just, own your Bitcoin. And so when he said this, I mean, my initial reaction was, who's he kidding? Because he owns Binance. Binance is a third party. You put your Bitcoin on a Binance platform, you're trusting Binance, right? So people trust him all the time with their crypto. So how is that different than trusting, a company like a Brinks, for example, to hold your gold? They've been doing it for 160 years, and nobody's lost any gold with Brinks. So you could trust third parties. But also, I know that one of the biggest things in crypto right now is stable coins. And what's a stable coin? Well, that's where you have a third party who you trust with your dollars or, your euros or your yen, whatever, your token is stabilized to. Most of them are dollar tokens, right? Like Tether, you're trusting Tether. When you buy Tether's token, you've trusted a third party that they have the dollars to back up your token. So if he's going to say that, well, tokenized gold is no good, well, then neither are, stable coins. He's basically throwing the whole industry under the bus at the same time he's criticizing tokenized gold. So I pointed that out. I said, look, I'm happy to debate this with you. Like, I love to debate tokenized gold versus Bitcoin, not just regular gold,
right?
Because it was the concept of tokenized gold that he was critical of and said I had it wrong. And so he said, yeah, let's do a debate. And I'm like, great. And I'm trying to figure out when, all of a sudden, like everybody wants to host it. All these podcasters, big podcasters, we want to host the debate. We want to do the debate. Everybody wants to do the CZ Schiff debate. And then CZ ends up saying, hey, why don't we have the debate in Dubai at Blockchain Week is coming up, which is not what I had in mind when I threw it out there. I was going to just do something from my home, on the internet, like, some of the other, like, crypto, debates I've had. But since he extended the invitation and was gracious enough to, accept the debate, I wasn't going to, refuse it. So I came out here.
Nice.
And,
And you posted a lot of selfies again. In every
Yes.
Bitcoin conferences, crypto conferences, I see your face everywhere. People just love you.
Yeah, again, a lot of the people that are hardcore enough to come to a conference, right? Because, if you just casually buy a little Bitcoin, you're not necessarily going to go to a Bitcoin conference. But the people that go to the conferences are more into it. Before you get into Bitcoin, usually you have to have a certain perspective on things. And a lot of people that have those perspectives where they distrust government, distrust central banks, fiat currency, and all that, a lot of the people who feel that way because of me. Right? I'm the one that, got them thinking that way. I put them on a path, and they went down the path and eventually took a detour and got to Bitcoin. But, had I not put them on that path, they wouldn't have found the detour to Bitcoin. And then even people that necessarily didn't buy Bitcoin because of me, but who own Bitcoin and know about me, I say a lot of the things that lead people to want to buy Bitcoin.
Right.
Even though I tell them not to. But a lot of the things that I say, for example, as to, why you would want to own gold, they'll just apply that to Bitcoin. Yes, I agree. Everything Peter says, and I'm buying Bitcoin because I believe what he's saying.
Some of the characteristics are the same.
No, I don't think there are any characteristic.
None?
No, because I mean, Bitcoin is nothing, has nothing in common with a physical metal, a valuable precious metal. The only thing that Bitcoin has in common with gold is if you look at gold's monetary properties, apart from the fact that it's a store of value, which Bitcoin can't copy at all because there's no value there to store. People use salt as money.
Right.
That's where the word salary comes from, but cattle has been money. I mean, it's, there's a lot of weird commodities that have been money. But what makes gold better money is its portability, its durability, its divisibility, its fungibility. Bitcoin has those characteristics. It is fungible, it is divisible, it is portable, it is durable, right? So it has those things. But when you separate that from the intrinsic value of the metal, right? What what you can do with gold that you can't do with other metals or other elements, right? When you separate that, the portability and divisibility are meaningless, because when you're dividing gold, you're dividing something. When you're porting gold, you're porting something. But when you divide Bitcoin, you're dividing nothing. You're porting nothing. There's nothing there. So the only thing that gives Bitcoin its market price, and because it has a price, right? Bitcoins are over $90,000 right there. The reason that somebody is willing to pay $90,000 for a Bitcoin, or 93,000, is because he thinks that in the future somebody's going to pay more.
But isn't that every financial product?
No. I mean, yes, when you buy a stock, the idea is that the price will go up, but it's supposed to be a function of the business having more value. So I invest in a company, and I think that in the future, that company is going to have more earnings than it has today, right? It's going to grow its earnings. Maybe it's going to pay a higher dividend than it pays now, or maybe it'll pay a dividend. Maybe it doesn't even pay a dividend now, but I believe in the future it will, but it's a more mature company, it earns more money. So I'm betting on the growth of the business, the underlying business. But Bitcoin doesn't grow. It doesn't do anything. It stays exactly the same. I mean, the Bitcoin is just, nothing's going to change other than the price. But why would the price of Bitcoin go up if the Bitcoin itself is not going to change? It's not going to generate any more income because it generates no income, right? And it's a function of expecting people just to pay more for the exact same thing, right? If I think someone's going to pay more for my stock in the future, it's because the company is earning more money, right? It's a more valuable business because it has more sales, it has more income. And so that's changing. But Bitcoin is never going to change. The only thing that can change is the price. And the only reason the price is going to be higher is if somebody is willing to pay that higher price.
Or money in the world becomes more. People keep on printing, and that is just a system.
Right. Well, look, if we create inflation, right, then prices go up for things. But they may not go up for Bitcoin, because prices go up for things that we need and have to buy. Right. So if I have to buy, gas, and the government doubles the money supply, all right, well, maybe I have to pay twice as much for the gas that I need. But I don't need Bitcoin for anything. So it's not a function of, how much money there is. The function is the demand for Bitcoin. And what drives the demand for Bitcoin? It's the belief that the price is going to go up. That's all of where it comes from. And so you need to have more people that believe the price is going to go up. And when the price does go up, people have to think, okay, it's going to go up some more, right? It has to always go up, because that's the only way to drive the buying, because every buyer has to believe that there's another buyer who's going to pay more than they did, right? That's the whole greater fool concept that drives Bitcoin. But the reason that the greater fool concept doesn't work is because you eventually run out of fools. There is no greatest fool, right? You have the last one, and then everything collapses. But the problem is, you don't know where you are. You don't know if there's another fool that's going to follow you, or if you're the one stuck holding the bag. But I think a lot of the people in the Bitcoin community who never sell their Bitcoin, right? Because they've been brainwashed by the people who do sell their Bitcoin, right? That's who made up this never sell your Bitcoin. It's the people who want to sell theirs that want everybody else not to, right? Because they have to maintain the market, and they want to compete with other people. So the people who just hodl, right? They're ultimately going to lose everything because they're hodling nothing. The only way you're going to make money in Bitcoin is to sell, but you only make money because somebody else bought. And so the profits that are ultimately made in Bitcoin just represents the money that other people lost in Bitcoin, right? There's no net wealth, right? When miners create Bitcoin or they solve a mathematical problem to produce a Bitcoin, they haven't increased the wealth of the world. They haven't added anything of real value. These aren't factories that are producing goods, right? That make my life better. They're just solving meaningless math problems, and they're just creating these tokens, right? So the world is not richer because we have all this Bitcoin. But what Bitcoin does is enables a transfer of wealth.
Right.
The people who sell Bitcoin make money. The people who buy Bitcoin lose money. Now, if the people who buy Bitcoin can then turn around and sell Bitcoin at a higher price, then they will make money. But just because the person who paid the higher price, now he loses the money.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How is that different than gold? Our producer there, he used to be a Bitcoiner. Now he loves gold too. And I mean, I love Bitcoin and I talk about Bitcoin all day, but the world is huge. People have different views. And for people that buys gold, not everyone wants to wear jewelry or they don't use it in electronics, but for the same reason why people buy Bitcoin.
Well, I agree that there are investors who buy Bitcoin for the same reason that I buy gold.
Right.
But I think they're misguided to do that. And I think eventually that's going to stop.
Then maybe we can talk about why is gold valuable? Rather, instead of
gold is that. Look, see, I'm wearing a gold watch, right? And so, if this watch was not made of gold, Rolex couldn't sell it for anywhere near as much money.
Right.
I mean, I guess they could have made it out of steel, right? And they make watches that are not made out of gold. I mean, you can still have a watch, but it's not going to be as nice, right? It's not going to. I mean, so. Gold lends itself because of its properties, right? I mean, I can go, you can swim with a gold watch. You can take a shower with it. It's not going to rust, right? It's not going to tarnish. And so this watch is going to look exactly like this, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I can, my son, my grandson can wear this watch and it'll look just as nice, right? And say, hey, this is my great grandfather's watch, been passed down, right? It's an heirloom.
我们在一个牛熊市的转折点，计划要长期持有的币种可以放到哪里呢？如果想要让他们去帮忙稳定升息，可以考虑像是 Nexo 这样的平台。Nexo 它是一家2018年就成立的加密金融平台，在欧洲、美国、澳洲都有受到监管，有超过700万名用户，管理的资产呢超过110亿美元。它不直接托管客户的资产，而是交给像是 Ledger Vault、Fireblocks 跟 Back 这种托管机构。那这些托管机构呢，又有 Lloyds of London 或者是 Arch Insurance UK Limited 这种保险公司提供保障。目前 Nexo 平台上面活期的年化报酬大概是比特币 6%， 以太币跟 Solana 7%，USDT、USDC 分别是12%跟13%。那每一天呢，它会自动发放回馈，随时可以提领。如果想要质押一定的时间长度，还可以得到更高的回馈。不过我自己是不管在什么平台都只用活期，因为我喜欢随时可以提领操作的这种灵活度。这里的收益是来自于个人或者是机构用户在平台上面抵押借贷的利息。现在就到资讯栏按连结立刻尝试。
But what gives gold its value are the properties that it has that are unique to gold. And there is a lot of demand for gold in industry, not just in jewelry, but there are a lot of industrial applications where gold is used. Even though it's very expensive, it's used because nothing else can do what it does. Now, in some cases, I mean, wiring is not made out of gold, it's made out of copper. It would probably be better if it was made out of gold, but it's too expensive. So in a lot of applications, you can substitute copper for gold because it'll work, right? But in those applications where you can't, like I can't make my watch out of copper, but in the applications where you need to have gold, then you buy gold. And so there's real demand for gold. That's what gives it its value. What makes it money are the other characteristics, like durability, portability, fungibility. But its inherent value comes from the fact that it's a precious metal that has, all these unique and valuable properties. The reason the price is high is because it's also scarce. So gold can do a lot of great things, but we don't have a lot of it, right? If there was more of it around the earth, the price wouldn't be as high because, it'd be more readily available. So it's very valuable and very scarce. And so it has a high price, which, also lends itself to being money. But even if you are not a jeweler, and even if you are not, making computers or in aerospace or in medicine or any of the places where gold, when you're buying it because other people use gold, even if you don't. Like in prisons, right? Cigarettes become money, right? Why are those cigarettes valuable? They're valuable because smokers want them because they smoke. Now, you may not smoke. You could be in prison and you don't smoke. But there's somebody that does. And the fact that there are some smokers in prison, that's why cigarettes have value. So even if you don't smoke, the fact that there's somebody that smokes. Now, if there's no smokers at all, then the cigarettes have no value. They're not going to be money if nobody can smoke them. There needs to be an actual user that preserves the underlying value of the cigarette, right? And so the same with gold. When you own gold, even if you don't use it, somebody else will use it. Somebody else does need it, whether it's today or 100 years in the future, right? Someone's going to use that gold. So that's what gives it its value. But with Bitcoin, nobody uses it for anything, right? Other than trading, right? Which doesn't count. Bitcoin can't be a store of value. People say, oh, Bitcoin's a store of value. No, there's no value that you can store. And, gold is a store of value because gold doesn't decay. It doesn't, decompose or, so I can make, if I have a bar of gold, that could be melted down in 1,000 years and made into jewelry or used in all kinds of applications. But that's not the case with Bitcoin. It can't be used for anything today and it can't be used for anything tomorrow. But people confuse store of value with price. People say, well, it's a great store of value because I bought it 10 years ago and it's 10 times higher. Yeah, that's not a store of value. You bought it and the price went up, right? But price is not the same as value, right? Something can be overpriced or underpriced, right? Price is not value. Price is what you pay, right? Value is what you get. And price can be very divorced from value, right? It depends on the circumstances. But you can't store a price, right? So just because Bitcoin, the price is 93,000 for a Bitcoin, I can't store that because price is a function of supply and demand. And it's possible that in the future, there's no demand for Bitcoin, which means the price is zero if nobody wants it, right? There's never going to be a situation where there's no demand for gold. In fact, the lower the price of gold, the more demand there is. Bitcoin works the reverse. People want Bitcoin when the price is going up because they think it'll keep going up. When the price starts to crash, people don't want to buy.
Well, the past 2 years, gold price has gone up a lot, and a lot of governments are buying gold now. But the utility of gold didn't go up that much. So it is a store of value in some ways. People are afraid of either currency, inflation, all that. What is it that you're seeing?
No, it is a store of value, and people are afraid of inflation.
Right.
Not as fearful as they should be. I mean, I think you're going to have a lot more buying, but I think the central bank buying is more about the U.S. dollar and the credibility of the United States to ever get its fiscal house in order. We have deficits that are skyrocketing out of control.
You've been talking about that since 2006.
Yes, well, it's been a problem I was talking about before then. I mean, this problem did not happen overnight. It's been building over the decades.
But it's getting worse, is that what you're saying?
And everybody keeps saying it's not a problem because, it's for the long term, right? Well, it is a problem. It's been a problem, and now it's a much bigger problem. But the central banks understand this. They see that, our interest on our debt is, 1.2, 1.3 trillion a year. It's growing exponentially. The budget deficits are 2-3 trillion a year, and that's when we're not in recession. So the next official recession will probably have a $4 trillion deficit that year, maybe more. The Fed is, already stopped shrinking the balance sheet. I think it's very close to going back to quantitative easing. They're already cutting rates when rates are too low, and they should be raising rates. They're cutting rates. So we're pursuing a very inflationary monetary policy because we have so much debt. They're trying to bring down mortgage rates. They're trying to bring down long-term bond rates. They need to create inflation to do that. So they debase the value of the dollar, and foreign central banks can see this, and they're getting rid of their dollars. And what are they replacing their dollars with? They're replacing it with gold. I mean, that is the most viable substitute for the dollar. It's gold. And, a lot of people who have taken the dollar's role as a reserve currency for granted, they've done that because they didn't see a viable replacement. They said, well, the euro is not going to be the reserve currency, or the yen, or the RMB, but they overlook gold, right? Gold, it's not, in that hamper. They keep saying the dollar is the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper, right? Well, maybe so. I disagree with that, but even if you accept that premise, gold is not in that hamper. Gold is pristine, right? It's not dirty at all. And that's where the central banks are moving. They're moving away from US dollars and US treasuries to gold. And there are political reasons they're doing that too. It's not just purely economic, but that is how the pendulum is swinging. And to the extent that central banks are going to hold a lot more gold in the future than they do now, without a big increase in supply of gold, right, the price of gold has to go up for that reason. But as individuals and institutions start to realize that they also need to have exposure to gold, that's going to increase the demand for gold.
They haven't realized it yet?
No, I mean, maybe a small number. Right. Like my clients, have realized it, some with my help, some figured it out on their own, right, and just sought me out as a place to buy gold. I didn't have to convince them to buy it. They already decided. They just bought it from me because I gave them a good price, or they trusted me, right? But a lot of people own gold because I convinced them that they should buy it, right? And then they bought it from me. But the price is going to go up as more investors want to buy a relatively scarce commodity. There's not a lot of production coming online for gold. It's not like anybody's discovered a huge new gold mine. I think some of the new supply for investors may come from jewelry that gets melted down. I mean, some people, let's say in the US, if they lose their job and the economy is, very difficult and they need money and they have some old jewelry that they don't wear, they may just sell it, and companies will buy it for the value of the gold. So but that's not going to move the needle really on supply. There's not going to be, that might really happen with silver too, right? People start bringing in their silverware, right? Silver gets up to $100.
Is it really what you're saying now?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, I don't think people are melting down their silverware yet. Silver's almost $60.
Right.
But I mean, I think that's going to be, a source of supply. It's going to happen because people are going to be in desperate situation where they have a hard time paying the bills. They might say, I got some silverware, our good silverware that we don't really use very often, but if I can sell my silverware for $30,000, that might come in handy, where that silverware, might have only been worth $5,000, now it's like $30,000. Well, at that price, I'd rather have the cash than the good silver,
My curiosity wants me to ask you one question. Inflation is good for the top 0.1% though, because you own asset, you want governments to print. Why are you even fighting this system? It's good, it works in your favor.
Well, I would agree that the way my portfolio is positioned, the more mistakes the government makes, the more they screw up the economy, the more inflation they create, the wealthier I'm going to be.
Right.
Right. But I've invested based on what I think the government's going to do. Right. Not on what the government should do, but what I believe it will do.
Okay.
Now, just because I've invested based on the premise that the government's going to do everything wrong, I'm not going to advocate that the government do everything wrong. I'm going to advocate that they do the right thing. And if they do the right thing, then my investments are going to be harmed. It's because I don't expect them to to listen to me. But I would rather the government do the right thing, and then I would invest based on them doing the right thing.
I see.
Because I think I can make a lot more money if the government does the right thing. Because I know I would know how to invest. First of all, I would be short a lot of stuff right now. If I knew the government was going to do the right thing, I would be shorting a lot of things because prices need to come down.
Right.
Doing the right thing means stock prices go down, real estate prices go down, and so I would be short a lot of the stuff. So my investment portfolio reflects what I expect the government to do, not what they should do. But I never advocate, just because I'm going to profit from inflation, right? I'm not advocating that the government create inflation. I think that's wrong, right? And I think everybody would be better off. It's not like the rich benefit from inflation. I think the rich would benefit from a stronger economy where we had sound money. I think the rich could get even richer. If I've borrowed, $100 million to buy, $200 million worth of assets, right? Whether it's real estate or stocks, and now the government creates a lot of inflation, right? The value of my debt goes down, right? The real value of my assets hasn't really changed. The government doubles the money supply, all else being equal, prices double, my real estate double, my stocks double, but my cost of living doubles, right? So I'm not any wealthier. But where I've made money is the value of my debt has been cut in half. I used to owe 100 million, and now I effectively owe 50 million. So the real way that inflation benefits the rich is it wipes out their debt. Now, inflation also reduces the debt for people who have credit card debt but they don't have an asset on the other side of that, right? They didn't borrow money to buy an asset. They borrowed money to buy food, right? To take a vacation. So all of that stuff is gone. So they don't benefit because they don't have the asset that's going up. They just have the debt. And even if the debt burden is going down, they're still burdened by all that debt. Meanwhile, their wages are losing value, right? Or if they have savings, that savings is losing value. Wealthier people tend not to have wages. Maybe they run a business and they just can raise their prices. And so the way a lot of wealthier people earn their money, they have an easier time, recouping the increase in the cost of living. But a lot of workers, a lot of times wages don't keep up with other prices. And so even though your prices are going up, your income is not going up proportionate. Your income, maybe prices went up 100%, but your income went up 70%, right? So you're still behind. But there are a lot of people that live on a fixed income where they're getting killed. The middle class and the poor suffer more as a result of inflation. But if the rich have the right mix of assets and liabilities, yes, they can benefit from inflation, because inflation transfers wealth from creditors to debtors. So there are some rich people who are going to suffer because of inflation because they have a type of portfolio that's going to be harmed, right? Because inflation benefits debtors and hurts creditors. And a lot of rich people are creditors. If you think about it, who is the biggest debtor in the world? The U.S. government, right? We're probably the biggest debtor in the universe, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, if there's life on any other planets, but I'm sure the U.S. government is more in debt than any government on any planet in the universe. That'd be my guess. So the U.S. government creates inflation because it benefits the U.S. government to have inflation.
Right. And experts are pursuing the public that inflation is good. This is what we've been taught since we were little. And I was thinking this, like in ancient Egypt, there is slaves building pyramids, ancient China, slaves building the Great Wall, and modern world, it's the financial monetary system that traps. And this is how a society should work. I was reading this report that the bottom 50% of the world owns 1% of the total asset, which I think that is a different way to say slavery or like poor or poverty. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a huge divide now, I think, the gap between the richest and the poorest.
Yeah.
And I think that's been exacerbated by the monetary and fiscal policies.
I'm like, is this just how the world should work? That there has to be someone in the bottom
it is bad. I think the distribution that we have now is not it would be better if we had a not equitable, but we had a distribution that wasn't skewed, and it wouldn't be. And your point that you made about how the government keeps trying to convince us that we need inflation,
Right.
that was all government propaganda, because the government needs inflation, because that's how it diminishes its debts. That's how it plays Santa Claus. That's how it can give people something for nothing.
Yeah.
It creates this something with inflation. But the whole idea that inflation is necessary to have a prosperous economy, right? What they say is that, well, we have to make sure prices go up.
Yeah.
Because they say if prices went down, nobody would buy anything.
Exactly.
Which is bullshit. Because people buy more when prices go down. Because, I mean, you can afford it, right? If you can't afford to buy something, let's say something, like the first cell phone that came out. I think, the portable cell phone maybe was $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, but that's when you could buy a car for that amount of money, right?
Wow.
Only rich people used to buy cell phones. Why does everybody have a cell phone? Because they're cheaper now, right? As the prices went down, more and more people were able to afford them. According to the government, that should not have happened, right? The price needs to go up.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. Or they'll say, well, if you think the price of food is going to go down, you won't buy it. You'll just wait. So I'm going to go hungry. It's like, oh, I'm really hungry, but if I wait a month, the price of that food is going to be a little bit cheaper. So I'm going to just starve myself while I'm waiting for the price of food. No, you're going to buy the food when you need it. But you hope the price is lower in the future. I mean, who really thinks, I really hope my grocery bill goes up. I hope it costs me more to buy gas next time I need it, right? Or I really hope that my tuition goes up for my kids next year. This is nonsense. Everybody wants lower prices. Everybody benefits from lower prices. It doesn't stop demand. But act like, whoa, people are going to buy things when they need them. They're not going to hold off indefinitely for a lower price unless they can't afford the current price. Then they will hold off until they can afford it. But they overlook the time value, right? There is value in owning something today. So even if I know, if I buy a car today, it's X amount of money. If I wait a year, it'll be 1% or 2% cheaper, right? Well, okay, but I need the car right now. I can't wait a year. My other car is broken down. Even though I know it will be cheaper in the future, I'm still going to buy one.
Right.
Because I need it now. And that 2% is more valuable. They're trying to justify inflation, or they'll say businesses can't make a profit unless the prices are going up. And that's not true. In fact, cell phone companies make a lot more money today selling cell phones for cheap than they did 30 years ago when they were a lot more expensive, because they have more volume. And so what matters to business is not the price, but the margin. And as long as margins are being maintained, even if prices are falling, I'll make more money because I'll sell more goods. And so all these stories that the economists tell to try to justify deliberately creating inflation, it's all wrong. We don't need inflation. The government has brainwashed people into believing that inflation is a good thing because the government benefits from it. The government steals through inflation. Inflation is really like a hidden tax. And the last thing we need is taxes. We don't need more taxes.
I think the question I want to ask you before we wrap up this conversation is, you called out the 2008 financial crisis while everybody was still partying. Everybody's like, the economy is great. And then I watch a lot of the interviews and the hosts were shocked. They're like, oh, you've been talking about this since 2006 or like a couple years ago. And I want to know what you saw then, and are we seeing the same thing now?
Yeah, well, a lot of the problems that the mainstream was overlooking in the years leading up to the 2008 financial crisis, they've been overlooking very similar problems ever since that crisis, that we're in a bigger bubble in general now than we were then, as far as, the excess leverage and the inflated prices, asset prices. I think the housing market is probably in worse shape now than it was before the mortgage crisis. I think real estate prices are dramatically overpriced in the U.S. Prices should come down, I don't know, maybe 30%, 40% nationwide. But that would, put most people underwater on their mortgages and would result in a wave of defaults and foreclosures and bankruptcies. I mean, and there's a lot of other debt, a lot of other people that own a long-term, low-yielding debt. I mean, I think interest rates need to go much higher. They've been artificially suppressed. So there's a big problem to me that's even bigger than what was going unnoticed before '08. So I think we're headed for a crisis that will be an order of magnitude greater than '08. But to put things in perspective for like crypto and where we are here at this event, I see a lot of similarities there, as well as I saw during the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble, where you have people that are trapped in a bubble and don't realize that they are. Right? And so there's a lot of malinvestment. As a result, you have all these companies. Look at all these companies in the exhibit hall here. Most of these companies are going to go bankrupt, but they're attracting capital now because people want to get in on the action. There's so much hype around crypto and blockchain and everything related to it. There is a disaster coming for this industry for the people who have invested in it.
I do agree with you. A lot of the crypto companies are going to zero. Of course, I think, I would want this industry to go forward and all that, but you also see a lot of really strange behaviors like any other industries. But it's always so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
Please come back soon.
Sure.